New Delhi is facing an unprecedented diplomatic challenge, with tensions between India and Canada spiking significantly over the past few days following Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's allegations linking Indian agents to the murder of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Now, even as India has termed the charges as absurd, the past couple of days have seen several tit-for-tat moves, with both countries expelling each other's envoys and issuing travel advisories flagging risks in each other's territories. Now, in its latest move, India today suspended issue of visas to Canadian citizens till further notice. Now remember, from the 1980s, the Khalistan issue has always plagued bilateral ties between India and Canada, and the last 8 years of Trudeau's term have been no different. And in the middle of this worsening standoff over Nijjar's killing, the MEA has now branded the allegations by the government of Canada as primarily politically driven. It has also gone on to say that Canada should worry about its growing notoriety as a safe haven for terrorists. Remember, India has read the Right Act to the Canadian NSA during the G20 summit, something that reportedly did not go down well with Canada since the new Democratic Party of Khalistan supporter Jagmeet Singh supports the majority Justin Trudeau government. Also, this recent statement by the Ministry of External Affairs is coming up in the backdrop of Gurpant Singh Pannoon, the chief of Sikhs for Justice, which is a pro-Khalistan organization that's banned in India in 2019 itself, threatening Hindus of Indian origin in Canada and asking them to leave the country. This, in fact, has led to Member of Parliament Chandra Arya from Trudeau's own party launching a scathing critique of the government for purportedly permitting hate crimes under the guise of freedom of speech and expression. Now, back home, Akali Dal chief Sukhbir Singh Badal also met with the Home Minister Mr. Amit Shah and urged for quick resolution, claiming that a panic-like situation is now developing among the Indian people in Canada. So while this one's a constantly developing story, we are asking that by making unsubstantial allegations against India, hasn't Prime Minister Justin Trudeau weaponized the radical Sikhs against their parent country and polarized the Indian diaspora in Canada for political motives? Let's put that up for debate.
Any involvement of a foreign government in the killing of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil is an unacceptable violation of our sovereignty. In the strongest possible terms, I continue to urge the government of India to cooperate with Canada to get to the bottom of this matter.
The issue of safe havens and places to operate is being provided abroad, including in Canada. We would expect that that is the main focus. The question is, do we have the political will to address terrorism, or we want to justify it and condone it?
I can't understand how glorification of terrorism or a hate crime targeting a religious group is allowed in the name of freedom of speech and expression. There would be an outrage in Canada if a white supremacist attacked any group of racialized Canadians, asking them to get out of our country. But apparently, this Khalistani leader can get away with this hate crime.
We were talking about the media briefing of the Ministry of External Affairs earlier. Let's actually break down as to how India has drawn the line. This is, in fact, MEA's scathing counter. Let's actually take a look at the points one by one. The first statement that's come out by Arindam Bagchi of the MEA, he has gone on to claim that Justin Trudeau's allegations are politically driven. That's a huge claim. He's also gone on to say that there must be a political will, really, to take care of terrorism that is emanating out of the Canadian soil. He further goes on to claim that India has shared inputs on K radicals in Canada. Remember, these inputs were shared in the year 2018. There was a list released, and all of those Khalistan sympathizers were on that list. Niger also was part of that list, but Canadian authorities did not really do anything about it. No crackdown on K elements on Canadian soil. That's the other argument that's been put by the Ministry of External Affairs. Indian community in Canada is also facing threats. That's also something that is a highly underlined flag, something that has come up by the Member of Parliament from Trudeau's own party, like I mentioned. Now, Canada is becoming a safe haven for terror and organized crime. That also is a blot on the Trudeau regime, considering that safe haven has been granted to these criminal elements and nothing really is being done about it. MEA further goes on to claim that our missions, in fact, the Indian missions, are unable to operate due to security threats. An important point that has been yet again underlined by the Ministry of External Affairs by India. They also go on to claim that security concerns are forcing India to pause the visa process. Right now, the process that's being halted, there was a statement made on that too. Now, the MEA spokesperson, Mr. Bagchi, also goes on to claim that there are concerns over Canadian interference in internal affairs. Remember, that's also a tricky aspect that needs discussion at the moment. He further goes on to say that Canada should be concerned about its reputation, that is, of providing this safe passage and safe haven to these Khalistan sympathizers and these secessionist forces. And, in fact, he's also claimed that India has given full support to Justin Trudeau when his plane had a snag. Remember, that entire snag after he was supposed to return after visiting India for the G20 summit. India, in fact, offered help, but Justin Trudeau in Canada refused that. Let me take this across to my guests who joined me this evening on Viewpoint. Manju Seth, who's a former diplomat, is with us. Also with us is Raymond Vickery, who's a senior associate at the Centre for Strategic and International Studies. And also with us is Deepak Punch, who's a Canadian journalist. Now, I'll actually begin with Ms. Seth first. I'd first like to understand from you, Ms. Seth, whatever is happening right now concerning the India and Canada diplomatic relations that are obviously nosediving by every passing day. I'd like to understand the first reaction that had come in from the Canadian Prime Minister. Would you consider that a knee-jerk reaction, since I just mentioned G20 and the bad press that he'd received at that time? Do you think it was a knee-jerk reaction?
I think it was a little to do with that and what happened in Delhi, but not the main reason. I think the main reason must have been, I think he was because of his partner in the government, the NDP.
Yeah.
They, I think, felt that because it was this great. He said that he had taken it up with the Indian government and told the Prime Minister, etc. PM Trudeau said regarding the killing of Niger, but did not receive a good response. So I think that when he went back, his NDP partner said, "So what have you done? Now you need to do something." I think that's because without that NDP support, his government falls. And so I think that is a factor. And he suddenly, out of the blue, has come out with this, public statement and public expulsion, naming of the person who's been expelled, a senior diplomat. So it is really something very not normal. And it has led to this nosedive, as you mentioned, in our bilateral ties, and has affected the relationship, I think. And really a lot needs to be done to set it back. And as you've rightly mentioned, the Indian embassy has also stopped issuing visas today because of the threats that are emanating from these groups. And these Khalistani groups is not only one group. It's not just the ones who are supported in the government or who support the government. There are many others, and amongst themselves there are rivalries, and each one trying to get the upper hand and say in matters. So I think that is another aspect which is playing out, and so the NDP would want to bolster its position, I think. And so all these elements are at play, and Justin Trudeau, I think, the Prime Minister needs to understand that this is not the way international relations are conducted.
But exactly my question, ma'am. Whatever happens to diplomacy? What happens to diplomacy? How can a leader of a state speak like in the fashion that Mr. Trudeau has? In fact, one of the statements really also said that we are not meaning to provoke India. Why would he use the term like that? Yeah,
absolutely. It's because it was a provocation the way the whole thing panned out. And then he was trying to soften it a bit and say, no, it was not a provocation. We're just laying out the facts. But you don't lay out facts publicly like this. But anyway, that's a done thing. And I think it is not really called for at all. And it's not the norm in international relations. But he has done it, and the consequences are there for everyone to see. Now let's see where things go. And both sides will have to really work on this to get the relationship back on a better level. But I think after the elections, maybe because Trudeau's ratings, I believe, are very, very low at the moment.
Yes.
And so if he does not come to power, and the other, because up till now we've had excellent relations with Canada, barring a few ups and downs in the relationship over the years. And so I don't think the next government, whoever comes, will want to continue with this kind of attitude that Mr. Trudeau has shown. And I think essentially it is to safeguard his position. I think that is one strong.
But Mr. Vikuri, I would like to bring you in here. Would you really call the India-Canada relation, even before this troubled aspect really hit that resulted in the nosediving of the situation further, as a great relationship? Because it has always had a checkered history when it is about the Khalistan sympathizers finding safe ground. I believe from the 1980s, this has been the key point, the moot point of the argument when it comes to India and Canada relations.
Well, I think it's absolutely clear that this is a very serious situation. It is absolutely irresponsible, in my view, for a Canadian Prime Minister to make the kind of allegations that have been made. This is trying to put India in the same category as Russia, which has conducted these kinds of operations. People have said that Russia has an open window policy, that it pushes people out of windows in order to get its way. It really comes down to the facts. It's true that the relationship between India and Canada has gone up and down, but they are both democracies. Both subscribe to the rule of law. Both are in favor of freedom of speech. So I don't think that the actions of one man, in this case the Prime Minister, should be taken as exemplary of the Canadian people. It is very unfortunate that this has occurred, but it has received really no welcome or sanction
Mr.
from
Vikuri, while you say
allies.
that, he's the one who is representing the people of Canada. If there is a statement which is as brazen and stark as the one that Justin Trudeau has made, that comes in from the Chief of State in Canada, how does one read that statement? And like the question that I was asking Ms. State, what happens to diplomacy in that case? Even though there was something that he wanted to respond to when it comes to India's objection to Canada giving that safe haven to Khalistan terrorists, there could have been a dialogue that could have been done. That's something that also was a part of conversation between the bilateral, between the Indian Prime Minister and the Canadian Prime Minister during G20.
Well, it's absolutely clear that what you say is correct, that Prime Minister Trudeau should have understood how difficult this situation is in regard to Khalistan.
Yes.
It is my time in government, in talking with the former governor of Punjab, S.S. Ray, who was the ambassador at the time, made clear to me how very serious it is in terms of loss of life, in terms of interference with the ability to build peace and prosperity. So it is absolutely true that it is a very difficult situation when a prime minister does that. But you have to look back at the parliamentary session, and already you have the opposition saying, where are the facts? If the facts are not produced, Mr. Trudeau will be history, in my view, as a politician in a democracy. And that is the real question. India, the United States, Canada, the UK all have written into the constitutional documents freedom of speech and freedom of expression, but that does not give a right to take action in terms to a serious matter such as breaking off a portion of another country. In the United States, we certainly realize that we had more people killed in our Civil War than in all of the other wars that America has been involved in.
Okay.
So, not to recognize the seriousness of that and to take action is not permissible.
Okay, Mr. Poonj, I'd like your inputs on this. First, the first point that was made by Ms. Seth about Justin Trudeau being boggled down by the political situation, the domestic politics in his country, and how the NDP support that he's getting because of the minority government that he has a lot to do with the statement that he's made. How does one read that?
The Liberal government is in the running condition only because of NDP. And the leader of NDP is Mr. Jagmeet Singh Dhaliwal,
Yes.
who is also a member of WSO. And when he comes, then the K factor comes. And not only this, there will be rallies all over Canada from now to 25th of September outside all the consulate offices, and nobody like police will be going with them. Police will be going with the protesters to save the protesters, not the anti-protesters.
Okay.
So the situation over here will be really bad. It all happened. It all started during the farmer protest, and it's coming so far. So basically, the Liberal government is in power only because of Jagmeet Singh and NDP support. So that's the really problem is. But if we talk about diplomacy, Canada has failed not with India but also with Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia. So these four countries are the world power, but the foreign policy of Canada, the relationships of Canada with these four countries are at risk, are on the edge, and that's really very risky for Canadians and Indo-Canadians, because the inflation inside Canada is very high. Mortgage rates are very high. So I think just to tackle, instead of tackling those real issues, these issues are being made to be in power.
Okay.
That's the real situation of within Canada.
Since you mentioned about the rallies that will go on till 25th of September because of the political influence of the NDP also, that is going to have a lot of impact. We had seen what had happened to the Indira Gandhi tableau in Brampton.
Yes.
And
Yes.
there was so much said as far as the international community and also vis-a-vis India. There was a very, very strong response against it. Despite all of that, will we see something similar that had happened in the past because of the statement currently that's been made by the Canadian Prime Minister? Will that brazenness continue, since you are saying that the police is also there to support the people who are protesting or the Khalistan sympathizers?
For sure. After that Indira Gandhi, tabloid, after that, that one incident happened because there were posters all over Brampton, all over Surrey, all over Calgary,
Yes.
saying all the CGs, consular generals, are killers of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and nobody did that. Nobody did anything about that. The posters are still there on the streets. Not only this, these posters are on the government buildings in few cities, in Brampton, in Surrey, in Calgary, and in Edmonton. These posters
Is
are
that
all
right?
over on the government buildings, and nobody is tearing it off.
Okay.
So the situation will be really bad if the rallies will be there. It may go violent, as if the people from Haryana, the students, or people from Gujarat or Rajasthan, Indo-Canadians, there is a big divide between Indian diaspora, all because of this. So
Correct.
because of this one man, it's really creating a big division. And if people from Haryana, Rajasthan, and UP will come as anti-rallies, there will be a violence for sure, and that who will tackle that?
Oh, absolutely. Ms. Seth, would you like to weigh in on this point? This is a huge point that Mr. Punj is making, considering that was a huge bone of contention when the Indira Gandhi tabloid was put on display. Nothing really was done about it. There was a huge response from the Indian side, and there was some sort of an assurance from the Canadian authorities. But from what we hear from one of the journalists in Canada is that those posters depicting that scene of assassination of the then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi of India still dominate the walls of several government buildings in Canada. How does one read this situation? This is appalling.
Absolutely appalling, and that's the whole issue that India has been trying to convey to the Canadian authorities, to the Canadian Prime Minister, that you have not taken any action where action is required. We have told you what is the issue, and we have protested, but somehow the government seems to think that India's objections need not be taken seriously because we support free speech. Even when he came to for the G20 and he met the Prime Minister briefly, PM Trudeau again said we support free speech, but this is not free speech. And he said we take action against hate speeches or hatred. But this is all hatred, incitement, and I think the government of Canada is not taking any cognizance of this fact that what they are by turning or by just being not taking the right action, they are actually creating a divide within the people. And there were reports today, I was reading that in one of the cities near Vancouver, there have been these gang wars taking place, and they are targeting Hindus and other Canadians, citizens, and Hindus especially are being targeted. So I think this is becoming a really intolerable situation, and the fact that the government has not done anything. These posters should have all been removed because they are hate inciting.
Absolutely. Mr. Punj wanted to make a point, but before you make that point, Mr. Punj, since Ms. Seth also spoke about free speech, and in the name of free speech, these things are being allowed under Trudeau's regime, I also would like to bring our viewers' attention to the speech that Pannoon had in fact made on television, and how this was given a brazen go-ahead. Nothing really was done about it. In fact, Chandra Arya, MP from Trudeau's cabinet, in fact, flagged it, and he said that how this should be branded as hate speech. What is Justin Trudeau planning to do about all this?
Yes, that was the point I would really like to make. Gurpatwant Pannu, he just said, yesterday, that all the Hindus living in Canada from India, they should go back to India. And sorry to say, there is no hate speech law in Canada. Anybody can say anything, and it's freedom of expression and speech. But when it comes to own people, freedom convoy happened in Ottawa, and Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh put emergency on those, and they crooked their properties. The people from freedom convoy are still in jail. So when it comes to their own people, it's emergency, and when it comes to Indo-Canadians, it's a freedom of expression. This is really kind of a big hypocrisy is being played on this part of earth.
Mr. Vickery, how would you respond to this selective sort of a treatment that's going on in Canada? And I'd also want you to weigh in on the kind of international press that we have seen after Justin Trudeau made that statement, especially the statements that were put out by Australia, where again this Khalistan terrorism is finding ground in, that's another country, and also the UK, another one of such countries.
Well, I think that you have to distinguish between the speech and the actions. Freedom of speech is one thing, but the upholding of law and order is incumbent on any government to protect the rights of all citizens. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has cast this as a dispute between people who are exercising a freedom of speech and those who would stop it. That is a very simplistic and incomplete view of the situation, as your panel participants have pointed out.
Okay.
It is also, though, incumbent upon Indian authorities not to conflate the kind of inflammatory statements with actions which are in fact criminal and in fact lead to the disorder and the absence of the kind of peace that is necessary for a democracy to endure. So I think there's no question that there is not sufficient appreciation at this time, and other actions need to be taken in Canada. At the same time, just continuing to escalate the situation if on the basis of speech that and statements which all ought to find abhorrent is not appropriate either.
No, but are you saying that for both sides? Are you saying that for both sides, or are you saying that for the inflammatory statements that have come in and they have in fact made it to national television in Canada, or are you also talking in the response that India has given to Canada?
Well, I'm talking about the basic values which apply to democracies.
Okay.
And those apply across the board. And it is not correct to forget those values when one is in this kind of a situation. What we need to do is to resolve it. This is not in anybody's interest. I think there are obviously political aspects to this. There are only 40 million Canadians, and there's a higher percentage of Sikhs in Canada than there is in the U.S. But that is not the story. The real question here is, what are the facts? And thus far, we don't have any facts.
Okay. Mr. Ponch, Canada wants India to cooperate in the investigation over the allegations that it has put against India, claiming Indian agents have been involved in the killing of Nijjar. While that statement is still being wedded upon, and India has called it very, very absurd, there has been another inter-gang rivalry in Canada on Canadian soil, where Sukhdul has been killed in that inter-gang rivalry. What does it say about law and order situation on Canadian soil in Canada? Isn't it too rich of Canada to point fingers at others?
Very good question. Every 6 minutes, there's one car being stolen in Canada. Every 6 minutes. It never happened before. And gang wars in Surrey is way too much. Even in, it was a little peace here on the eastern coast, like Brampton and Toronto area, Greater Toronto area. But now, when you see a lot of people in rallies, oh my God, you can't even see that. There will be thousands of cars. People will be, flying the, all the, flags, and they will be out of the cars, from the windows, and they will be sitting on the cars while driving, and nobody will stop them. It's that kind of situation will be there. If somebody will be covering the rally, they will be having loudspeakers, and it will be a big time nuisance. That happened earlier too, so many times. So the law and order situation in Canada, within Canada, is very scary. Not only within our community, even there are so many operations are being done by police. So many every week or every other week there are so many handguns and other ammunition being seized by the police. And unfortunately, people behind all those arrests and the people who being arrested, unfortunately, are within our own community. Sorry to say that, but the situation within Canada is very, very bad.
And Ms. Seth, when we talk about the Indian community, or for that matter, the Indian diaspora in Canada, one of the largest that any country can actually, boast of, what happens to the anticipation and also the anxiety of people who are already living there and the people who are planning to in fact go to Canada now that the visas have been suspended, or for at least till now, till further notice? What happens to that? There is no word from the Canadian authority vis-a-vis the Indians who are staying there.
I think that's what, because they are not their citizens at the moment in this whole narrative. You see, they've been talking of Canadian citizens on Canadian soil, Canadian. So they're not really worried about the others, and they wouldn't, directly target the Indian, the government at least, because many of the students are full-paying students at their various universities. A huge part of their economy runs on Indian students being, studying in Canada. But also coming to the Indians present in Canada, or even the Indian origin people who are in Canada, for them also this whole situation is a little worrisome. And even the Sikhs are not, the number of Khalistani supporters or sympathizers amongst the Sikh community is also not so big. It's extremely small. But they are more vocal and more they're able to get away with promoting this narrative. And as somebody was saying, as people say, if you look after, if you promote, or look after snakes in your backyard, and I think Hillary Clinton had said this in the context of Pakistan.
Yes.
Then you can't expect not to be bitten by them. And I think that is where the situation is getting scary. That they are soon going to start targeting the Canadian, Canadian citizens as well. Not only the foreigners or the Hindus or the Hindu origin, Indian origin Hindus there, or the Indian origin Sikhs. It will soon start, because if you're not a sympathizer of the Khalistani movement, I think they might start attacking the other Sikhs also. You don't sympathize with us, you don't deserve to be, living here. So I think that kind of we can just feel how that is coming about with all their negative propaganda that they are in the name of free speech that is going on. I think that is going to be a very, it's a little scary situation. And if for the future, people will have to rethink, at least young students will have to rethink if the situation doesn't, if the government there does not, find a solution to this, and both governments don't, then they'll have to rethink whether they should go to Canada. And Canada should think whether it doesn't want the huge amount of money or the huge fees that that a lot of Indian students are paying to study in Canadian universities. And
Absolutely.
the whole standards will deteriorate at some point of time. And a lot of the Indians are also contributing to their economy in a huge way.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Indian companies. So I think they really need to rethink their whole approach. But I don't know if this government will. Maybe, the chances of him coming back to power seem to be less. So we can only hope that the next elections will,
Right.
unless...
Mr. Vikri, I want you to weigh in on this Pakistan question. The fact that Pakistan from nowhere has, in fact, commented on the allegations that have been made by Canada against India, accusing India of being part of a series of these killings on international soil. That accusation coming in from a country which, as it is, has been on the grey list of FATF several times, is dealing with a faltering economy, and obviously internationally does not find much favour. Since we are on this diplomatic concerns and conversations that are a requirement of diplomacy, how do you read that?
Well, I read it as a situation in which there is not context given to what is being said. It seems to me that this all gets back to whether or not there is a production of facts in regard to the allegations. And what will happen now, unless we do concentrate on facts, is that there will be a continued escalation and blowback, not just between the United States and Canada, but throughout the democracies which were brought together so ably by Prime Minister Modi just recently in the G20. So I think that the context has to be looked at, and we have to be able to get to a resolution as soon as possible, or else this will continue to escalate just in the ordinary course of human emotions.
Right. Thank you so much for that last point, Mr. Vikri. And I'd also like to thank Ms. Seth and Mr. Punj for joining me on the broadcast. On that note, I'd like to wrap up because that is an important aspect. That is a requirement of diplomacy, so that escalation that's currently what is happening with the situation vis-a-vis India and Canada should not happen. There needs to be ample production of evidence before these scathing statements are made on public platform, and that too by a head of state. So there is a lot of answering that needs to be done by Canada, by the Canadian Prime Minister, Mr. Justin Trudeau, because he cannot really get away with the statement that he's made vis-a-vis India and then sit back. We'd have to see where this story really is headed. But right now, I am headed for a very short break. But on the other side, after sailing through in the Lok Sabha, the debate over the Women's Reservation Bill is currently underway in the Rajya Sabha. Where is it expected to sail through? Where it is, in fact, expected to sail through today as well. While the Modi government is leading the charge, can the members of the India bloc reap the political rewards is the big question that we are asking on the other side.
Happy to share a little more if you wish to talk about it. I will. I'll come back to that. I just thought I'll mention Manish's view. I'll come back to Manish because let me just make a couple of other points. I think, Sudhi, you had a query about Canada sharing any information. No, let me clarify. No specific information has been shared by Canada on this case, either then or before or after. We have, as we have said, or I think it's been made very clear, we are willing to look at any specific information. We have conveyed this to the Canadian side, made it clear to them that we are willing to look at any specific information that is provided to us. But so far, we have not received any such specific information. There was a indirect question on that. Let me also point out that from our side, very specific evidence about criminal activities by individuals based on Canadian soil has been shared with the Canadian authorities on a regular basis, but not been acted upon. So that is answer to both sides of it, I think you asked. There was a query on, I'll come back. There was a query regarding from, I think, मनीष झा, आपका प्रश्न था सिक्योरिटी पे. देखिए सिक्योरिटी के मामले पे मैं आपने पूछा था हमारे हाँ देखिए हमने इसलिए एडवाइजरी इशू की है और डिटेल एडवाइजरी है उनको क्या करना चाहिए. एक प्रश्न और था कि कुछ ग्रुप्स या हिंदूज अलग से नहीं. एडवाइजरी सारे इंडियन नेशनल्स के लिए हम इस तरह से नहीं देखते. इंडियन नेशनल्स के लिए है, स्टूडेंट्स के लिए है, जो ट्रैवल कर रहे हैं, जो वहाँ रह रहे हैं, उनके सबके लिए एडवाइजरी है. एंड हम चाहेंगे कि वो उस एडवाइजरी को देखें और पालन करें उसका. Sahil, your query was on whether we are sending security. No, look, we have always believed that it is the host government's responsibility to provide security. If there is some places we have our own security posture also, but look, I don't want to discuss security measures in public. That's not an appropriate situation. If I could come back to what Manish, you asked about, as I said, we have ongoing conversations with friends and partners. We have made our position quite clear to them on the lines that I've outlined just now. That's why I thought I'll outline our position first, that there has been no specific information and we're willing to look at that if provided. On the issue of a threat, Vinita, you mentioned for various things. Look, I don't know how to react to this. We obviously condemn any threat. But look, the overall, I think we should look at the larger issue. The larger issue is of terrorism. And not just, terrorism, but also the fact that it is being funded and supported. And we know this for some time from our western neighbor, Pakistan. But the issue of safe havens and places to operate is being provided abroad, including in Canada. And that, we would expect that is the main focus. The question is, do we have the political will to address terrorism? Or we want to justify it and condone it. So I think that's what we would like to say. Yeah, no, as I said, one question at a time. On the issue of measures for our security, as I think the same question was asked, I don't want to discuss publicly, but of course we take, it is under the Vienna Convention, we expect host governments to provide security and for our premises, for our diplomatic personnel. What exact specific measures, I don't want to discuss publicly. प्रणय, आपका प्रश्न था वीज़ा पे. मैं जैसे भी बताया कि हमने
वीज़ा इश्यूज पे लेट मी एक्चुअली नहीं बताया था मैंने, आई थॉट हमने डिस्कस किया था. आपने देखा होगा कि हमारे जो कनाडा में हाई कमीशन और कॉन्सुलेट्स हैं उनको किस तरह के सिक्योरिटी थ्रेट्स वो फेस कर रहे हैं, उसको आप जानते हैं. इससे उनका जो सामान्य कामकाज होता है उसमें बाधा पड़ी है, उससे डिसरप्शन आई है. इसीलिए हमारी हाई कमीशन और कॉन्सुलेट्स अब टेम्पररीली वीज़ा एप्लीकेशंस नहीं प्रोवाइड कर पा रही हैं. हम इस सिचुएशन को रेगुलर बेसिस पे रिव्यू करते रहेंगे, इसकी समीक्षा होती रहेगी. पर अभी के लिए ये सिक्योरिटी सिचुएशन जो कनाडा में और कैनेडियन गवर्नमेंट की इनएक्शन से रहा है, उसके लिए हम इसको अस्थायी रूप में हम इसको वीज़ा आवेदन का जो प्रोसेस है उसमें बाधा पड़ रही है और इसीलिए हमने उसको अभी उसको स्टॉप कर रखा है. I know there'll be questions on this in English, so let me say that in English. You are aware of the security threats being faced by our High Commission and consulates in Canada. This has disrupted their normal functioning. Accordingly, our High Commission and consulates are temporarily unable to process visa applications. We will be reviewing the situation on a regular basis. That's what I wanted to respond to it on Pranay's question on visas. Megha, I think you asked on Pakistan comments. I don't even know how to quite respond to that. Pakistan, if there is the last country, I think talking about credibility, and I don't think anybody really takes their comments seriously at all. I think that covers it. Sahil, I had talked about security. Rajesh, Yeah, look, if there is any country, if you're talking about reputational issues and reputational damage, if there's any country that needs to look at this, I think it is Canada and its growing reputation as a place, as a safe haven for terrorists, for extremists, and for organized crime. And I think that's a country that needs to worry about its international reputation. I think that covers it. Can I take the next rounds of it? I saw your hand a long time. Yes, I'll come to you. Yeah, please. We're staying on Canada, right? Yeah, go ahead. Let's hear. Yeah?
This is Karishma Mehrotra from the Washington Post.
Okay.
Welcome back. You're watching Viewpoint with me, Griha. 27 years after the Women's Reservation Bill was first introduced in the Parliament, the Lok Sabha on September 20th passed a bill with near unanimity to amend the Constitution and provide 1/3 reservation to women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies. Calling it a historic legislation that will enable greater participation of women in the political process, Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to X, that's formerly Twitter, to thank the Lok Sabha members. Remember, the 8-hour-long debate in the lower house of the parliament yesterday witnessed members from the Treasury and opposition benches led by the Congress engage in a battle over who should get credit for the landmark bill and on the question of having a separate quota for women belonging to the other backward classes. Home Minister Amit Shah later assured the House that the government would rectify any shortcomings in the future. Now, the Congress, though, did make a U-turn from its very own 2010 position with its leader Sonia Gandhi, who was the first speaker in the debate, leading the demand for a separate quota within quota for OBCs after conducting a caste census and going on to also call in for an immediate implementation of the bill. As the discussions on 33% reservation for women in Lok Sabha and state assemblies are now being taken up in the Rajya Sabha, it is also being learnt that the Parliament will be adjourned sine die today itself after passing the Women's Bill in the upper house.
देश की मातृशक्ति का जो मिजाज बदलेगा, वो देश को नई ऊंचाइयों पर ले जाने वाली एक अकल्पनीय अप्रतिम शक्ति के रूप में उभरेगा। आप सबने जो योगदान दिया है सदन के नेता के रूप में, मैं आज आप सबका पूरे दिल से, सच्चे दिल से आदरपूर्वक अभिनंदन करने के लिए खड़ा हुआ हूँ।
देश की महिलाओं के बारे में मोदी जी की दोबारा याद आई, क्योंकि चुनाव आ गई तो फिर नया जुमला हो चुके हैं, हम क्यों इसका विरोध करेंगे? ये तो हमारा ही मुद्दा है।
9.5 साल ही सही, थोड़ा विलंबित सोच ही सही, we will certainly support women reservation bill in this house with all our criticism.
कोई रोड मैप नहीं और ये बिल पास किया जा रहा है। एक बड़ी आबादी को आपने खारिज कर दिया।
SC ST को और उसी तरह से पिछड़ा अति पिछड़ा की महिलाओं को भी उसी तरह से आरक्षण मिल जाना चाहिए। हम लोग अपना डिमांड कर रहे हैं, तो जो भी लगे देर लगे, लेकिन जो भी महिलाओं के लिए हो गया हम लोग तो शुरू से कर रहे हैं।
And we are getting some breaking news that's coming in from the Rajya Sabha, where we are told that the Congress MPs in the Rajya Sabha have now moved amendments for the other backward classes reservation within the 33% and immediate implementation of the reservation in the present setup of the seats. That's the latest that's coming in from the upper house of the parliament. My colleague Pallavi is joining us on the broadcast for more. Pallavi, this is a Congress U-turn from its 2010 position, but this has been the unanimous sort of an accusation by the opposition against the government while they have gone ahead and introduced this entire bill.
Absolutely, and that is also because suddenly the OBC vote bank seems to have become very important in the scheme of things, and that's the reason why suddenly the Congress party